Hi guys, hope you're doing really well today. In this video, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about trauma brain and what happens to our brain, what happens to our nervous system, what happens to our body when we have experienced a trauma. And if you were in a relationship with a psychological manipulator and you get out of that relationship, it's very likely that you are going to have trauma brain or symptoms of complex PTSD. And a lot of that is because you were in this relationship in the beginning, you were idealized, you were put up on a pedestal, you were love bombed, you felt like you met your soulmate, everything you did was amazing, you feel like you just finally met the person that you were destined to spend the rest of your life with. And that is often because the narcissist is a master at mirroring you and mimicking and figuring out what your sort of ideal mate is and presenting that to you, right? And they're going to do that same thing to everyone they're with, but they're going to be a chameleon, and it's going to change depending upon like who they are with, right? If you love to rock climb, they're going to learn to rock climb. If the other person, their new source of supply, loves to eat Cheetos and watch baseball, they're going to eat Cheetos and watch baseball. So they're going to morph into whatever that new source of supply is, what their ideal soulmate is, right? So, there's that idealization, and then there's the devaluation. And if you're with a covert narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath, that can be so slow, so gradual, so over time, like you are a frog being boiled in water. You may not even know that that's what's happening, right? So the devaluation, and then there's the discard, and the discard can be very drastic. You do not know what hit you. Typically, they will have already secured a new source of supply. You will find out that they were cheating on you, that they had a double life, or they'll discard you and immediately get into a new relationship that they had been previously already grooming, right? They do grooming almost like pedophiles. It's weird, but I read about that's very common for them. So, that when that happens, you may be in a state of horror and shock, It's like during the discard, a light switch goes off and you literally don't recognize the person that you're with. And they are not the same person that you may have spent 10, 15, 20 years, 5, whatever years with, and you are shocked. And your brain goes into a state of trauma. Again, these people do not provide closure. They do not provide honest communication. They do not provide an explanation. And it takes some time of healing, going no contact and getting away from them before you can start piecing together the reality that you were in a relationship with someone who was using gaslighting, which is making you question your own sanity and reality, manipulation, silent treatment, stonewalling, withholding of physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, withholding of information, sometimes withholding of money, withholding of communication. These are very secretive, sneaky people, right? They hide their cell phones, they hide their computers. This is not a relationship that is there's no foundation of trust, because, narcissists in general, they can't trust anyone. And that's because they're not trustworthy. And when you're not trustworthy, you cannot trust anyone, right? So they have this paranoia and lack of trust for everyone. So they're very careful and crafty about the information that they will allow to be presented, right? And of course, they're perfectionistic. So, they must present this image of perfection, right? They must be perfect, right? So they can't ever, there's no cracks in that. So, when you are in this relationship, or when you're getting out, you may have trauma brain. And trauma brain, again, it's your anxiety, you have fear, you have horror, you're in shock, your brain is perseverating over and over again. You almost have like OCD, where you're trying to figure out what the heck happened, and you can't stop thinking about them because you're in such the state of horror and shock, right? Read up on trauma brain. It's a real thing, and it is really happening, and you do not have control over it happening. You do have control over the triggers, or not control over them, but you can minimize the triggers by avoiding them, by going no contact with them and all their flying monkeys, and not looking at them on social media, blocking them on the phone, and all of that. But you maybe, you can minimize the triggers, and if when the triggers come, you can learn some strategies to heal from the triggers, like a deep breathing and meditation, and ground yourself in reality, or call a friend and to speak with the friend, like go see your therapist. Like there's a lot of things you can do to help you with the triggers, but you are going to be triggered, and you will go into that state of hypervigilance, or perhaps hypovigilance, where or hypoarousal, where you're listless, you're tired, you're depressed, you can't, you have no motivation. It's really difficult for you to get through just simple tasks during the day. Like these are all things that can happen, right? The hypoarousal or hyperarousal. So, quite often I think when we're in that state of especially hypervigilance, I think we attribute a lot more, perhaps a higher level of intelligence to the narcissist than they actually possess. And I guess what I mean by that, let me just articulate that. I think when you're dealing with one of these people, you are actually dealing with somebody who has a very low level of emotional intelligence, right? Very low. You're dealing with somebody who has the emotional capacity of, say, a 2 or 3 year old. You're basically dealing with a toddler, right? And like a tantrum throwing toddler. And their tantrum could be the silent tantrum, where they just don't talk to you and give you the silent treatment, and pout in their room or hide out. That can be, sort of what you're dealing with. So I think often, we think that they're much more, powerful than they really are. I think a lot of times narcissists are just acting out in this way, in these maladaptive, abusive ways of, silent treatment, stonewalling, gaslighting. They're doing a lot of that stuff because it is like their defense mechanism. Like that is all they know. That is what they learned either in their family of origin, or somehow in the, their course of their life, their early childhood life. They learned those maladaptive, strategies to operate in the world, right? That's what they learn. And if they're, I think a lot of the researchers say, like, if they're a psychopath, they were probably born that way. Like their brain is probably altered just in that way. And so you're dealing with somebody who has, like, in general, like a low level of emotional intelligence. And are they master manipulators? Absolutely. Are they fully aware that they're master manipulators? Probably the higher level ones, probably they're acutely aware of what they're doing. But I think some of the lower level ones, I think this is just like natural to them. It's almost as if they're just breathing, right? They're just breathing. Like, breathing is natural to us, and that's just what they do. It's like their defense mechanism. It's all they know, in healthy, normal relationships. When we start getting to be more emotionally mature as human beings, we can ask for our needs to be met in a healthy, sincere way. We can go to someone and say, hey, I have a need for more emotional intimacy. For me, ideal would be 2 to 3 times a week. Is that something that you are able to provide and to work with me on? And a normal, healthy person can say one of 3 things. They can say, yes, I can do that, and then they do it, so their words match their actions. Or they can say, no, I can't do that. And you can decide whether that works for you or not with their no. Or they can say, I don't know, but I will try. And here are some of the ways in which I'm going to try to fulfill that need. When you ask for one of your needs to be met, they don't take it, a healthy person doesn't take it as like a personal insult that there's something wrong, with them. And I think a narcissist, when you're actually asking for a need to be met, it's like they think you're saying to them, you're defective, and and insulting, as if you're insulting them, and you're not. You're just saying, hey, this is a need. Can you meet it? And but I think they take things very, very, very personal. They're like oversensitive. And remember, these are the especially the covert narcissists, these are like the misunderstood, like special people, right? They're special. They're terminally unique. Nobody except for very special people can understand, the covert narcissist, right? They're like the little white flower that, the overly sensitive. And, they think just normal, everyday, constructive criticism is like they take it so personally. They take everything so personally. They're ultra sensitive to anything that can be perceived as criticism. And keep in mind, it's not even necessarily it's not a legitimate criticism. It could be that they're perceiving it as criticism. You asking for a simple need to be met is perceived as criticism. And that's not how you mean it at all. You're just trying to get your normal, healthy needs to be met in a communicative fashion. That's what adults do. That's how that's how adults talk. That's how emotionally mature, emotionally healthy people can ask for their needs to be met, right? I don't know how really super planful all of them are. I think sometimes they're just operating under these conditions because that is all they know. They don't know any other way. They don't have enough introspection or self-reflection to grow and learn and mature in a healthy way to be able to communicate with another person. They just don't have those tools in their toolbox. And unfortunately, because they have this inability to recognize that there is anything wrong with operating this way. They don't think there's anything wrong. They feel very entitled. So they don't think there's anything wrong with cheating, gaslighting, lying, manipulating, silent treatment, stonewalling. Like, they don't think there's anything wrong with those behaviors because in their minds they must, they're perfect, right? So they don't think there's anything wrong with that. So why would they ever change? The only time people really change, and I think people are deeply capable of change, is if they get to a place where they're like, the patterns in which I'm engaging in are not working. They are maladaptive and they're not working, and they're causing me a great deal of dissatisfaction and unhappiness in my life. So I am going to learn some new ways of being and new patterns so that I can, grow and change as a human, and so I can get better and I can get happier. But a narcissist doesn't really have that ability to self-reflect. Instead, if something isn't working in their current relationship, they just replace it. They just replace that person. People are just interchangeable to them. People are just things. You're just a wash machine. You're a Maytag. You're a Whirlpool. You're interchangeable. They can't really see humans as being uniquely different. They're not really curious about your internal life. They don't really want to know who you are. They're not really interested in emotional intimacy. They really aren't. So really, probably narcissists would do best if they just hired a maid, or a man maid. I don't know if they just, I shouldn't be sexist there, but yeah, they don't really want, they only want people for what people can provide for them. Can you give them money? Can you give them sex? Can you give them validation? Can you make them look like, can you provide a good mask of normalcy for them and make them look like a legitimate married person who is, stable